Welcome, We Get Outdoors tribe, to this interview with Mr. James Manke. This guy, I was at a symposium working the other year, James, and I think you were supposed to be there and couldn't get there. But But one of the clients I overheard said, holy crap, one of those words, holy crap, James and Rob at the same symposium. How are we going to cut?
Nice.
So
I think we actually did meet at Lumpy the following year after that. You were there. I do remember meeting you.
That's it.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's praise or criticism or I don't know what it is, but obviously the pair of us had sparked something very similar in this. I think it was a little old lady in this.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know whether she was excited or delighted that she might get the opportunity to spend time with us both. Who knows?
That's great.
So for those of you who don't know James, what should you know? He's Canadian, so he's likely to say sorry too often.
Or A.
Yeah, A. What else should we tell you about James? So he's a highly recognized and in-demand international kayak coach, an incredible kayaker, mostly sea kayaking. Is that right, James?
Yeah, that's correct. Mostly
sea kayaking, and specializing in all things going upside down and coming back up the right way in a kayak, from what I know. Is that
you got it?
That's about it. Also, he's a guilty person who has to have a job on occasions, and guerrilla marketing seems to be a theme that runs through work. And I love it. I love guerrilla marketing. We can talk more about that later.
Oh yeah.
So James,
absolutely.
Welcome to We Get Outdoors. Welcome to the interview. Tell the guys, where are you now, and how could they find you if they wanted to?
All right. Well, first off, thank you, Rob, so much for having me. It's an honor to be on your show. Right now, I mean, with things going on in the world, I'm close to home. So home for me is Victoria, BC, which is on Vancouver Island on the south end. Right now, currently, we're mid-island, just a little bit north. In the Campbell River sort of area. And one of the reasons why we're up here is we have some local tidal rapids that are up in this area. And it's a great opportunity for me to get out and, challenge my own skills, build my own skills while I've got a little bit of free time, through the summer. I did have a tour planned for across Canada for this summer, which ended up being postponed until 2021. So that's now been put on hold. I do have some local instruction that will happen in the coming months, but I'm trying to respect the protocols and stuff, and slowly working my way back into it, and just taking the opportunity to work on my personal skills over the summer, which is nice because I haven't been able to do that in a long time. So I'm taking advantage of that for sure.
It is the instructor's problem. You spend all of your time not doing that much kayaking. You talk about it a lot, you think about it a lot, but you don't actually get to do it for yourself very much.
Absolutely. So I feel blessed that I have the opportunity to do that right now. And you're totally right. I mean, as instructors, we're constantly traveling around. We're giving that, constantly giving and giving, and there's not a lot of time really for yourself to work on your personal skills. So I feel very blessed that right now I have that opportunity to do it, and it's making a big difference for me personally. So it's great.
Are you solo boating up there, or are you managing to find friends to go and play in these big tidal rapids with you?
I have a small circle of friends that I'm sticking close with and trying not to expand that bubble too much. But yeah, I got friends that are, of similar skill level, and we're going up there pushing ourselves. And I think in a lot of those areas, yeah, you could go solo, but the smarter idea is to go up with somebody. Some of the rapids, Surge Narrows, if you got flushed off of there, you'd probably be fine. Oko Solo would be a completely different story. However, if you went for a swim there, it wouldn't end very well. So being with friends is a great idea. The other thing is we got one of my good friends up here. His name is Ruben Berg. He's got a Zodiac. So often we're going up in the Zodiac, and we have that as a means of transportation as well, which is a huge advantage, right? So we can really buzz around and get to all these really great locations, and whole lot of fun.
Wow. And that means when you get to a nice wave, you're fresh and ready to paddle, as opposed to having slogged your guts out for an hour or 2 hours to get there.
Wow, and you're showing up like a rock star, really. I mean, you're pulling in a Zodiac, dropping off your sea kayak, and just dropping into a wave. Like, what is better than that? Come on, you know.
I reckon a Navy SEALs helicopter, which you SEAL launch out the back of. I think that would be
oh, that would be so fun. Let's set that one up.
We've got to find like Jeff Laxia. You know Jeff, don't you? Jeff used to be.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Marines. He must know somebody who can hook us up with something.
Oh, for sure. Oh, I love Jeff. He's a gem. Such a good guy.
Yeah, that's
it. He'd be into that project, guarantee you. You're out there, Jeff. Come on, let's make this one happen.
That's it. I don't know if he's watching or not. I might have to go and tag him in so he can come join us.
Yeah.
But, I think that would be awesome. SEAL launching out the back of a helicopter into one of those tidals, like Skookumchuck or something like that would be incredible.
Totally. And just for the record, Jeff's going first.
And Mr. Koofy, because he hasn't played in a tidal rapid for a while either. So
right. Yeah, that's another one of those guys out there that are just shredding it hard, making it look too easy. Very talented boaters.
Sickening. Anybody who makes it look too easy, I'm always like, oh, feels
for sure.
So, where did you start your kayaking journey, mate?
So for me, it's a little bit of a story. I actually started kayaking from a fear of the water. So when I was young, I think it was about 14 years old, I fly fished a lot with my father. And we used to go in what were called belly boats. And a belly boat is like a little inner tube that you sit in. You put on a pair of waders, pair of fins, and you kind of kick backwards in the water, and you're water level, and you can fly fish. So you're moving backwards constantly when you're doing this. And my father and I were on a local lake in central British Columbia. And I'm kicking away, fly fishing, and I backed into a small island on the lake. Well, there happened to be a loon's nest on that lake, and the mother or father, whatever it was, came at me and started to attack me in my belly boat, which was absolutely terrifying. Of course, I had a fly rod, so I was able to defend myself to some degree. But once it went under the water and started dominating me, that was it. I was like, oh, man, I can't even see. This thing was just jetting past me and pecking at me, and I was like, out of the water. Bushwhack back to the truck. That was it. For my entire growing up after that, I avoided water like the plague. I just would not go near it. I was so terrified of it. And moving forward into my older years, like getting into my mid to late 20s, I started getting really big into motocross and to like dirt biking and that kind of stuff. And things started to progress. I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, as many of us are. And
maybe
the jumps got bigger. It was like a couple feet. Then it was starting to get to levels. If you're wiping out, you're really going to be hurting yourself. And I had a really good friend of mine. We were out messing around, and he came off this lip, put his foot down, and busted his femur, and it literally knocked him out cold. It was a very dramatic situation. Ended up getting him out of there. And after that event, it really made me think, okay, I think I'm next. Like, I've been doing this long enough that I'm the next one in line for getting injured like that. And I had to really think twice about it, because I've got kids, and, I need to respect that and be around for them. So at that same time, I was a web developer, which I still am. I still develop websites, and I'm a programmer and marketing guy and all that sort of stuff. But at that time, I was doing a lot of web development, and I made a website for a kayak manufacturer and ended up trading them for a kayak. And that kayak ended up sitting in my garage for quite a long time. And I just really had no desire to get into it. I'm like, it's a kayak. It means I got to go on the water. That's not happening. It just kind of sat there as an asset. If one day I needed to sell it, it was there. Yeah. That's what it was there for. And once this accident happened with motocross, I sold the bike, and I looked at the kayak, and I thought, maybe I'll give it a shot. I mean, in Victoria, Vancouver Island, I was seeing older people out on the water kind of floating around, and it looked pretty mellow. Maybe I could try this out. So I take this kayak down, I unwrap it out of its plastic, take it down to the lagoon, which is maybe about 10 or 15 minutes from my house. I get out on the water. I know nothing, Rob, I know nothing about kayaking at this point, right? I don't even know that you're supposed to put a spray deck on it. I don't know what these foot pegs are for, what these thigh hooks are all about. I just get in this thing, luckily I put on a PFD, and I paddle out, and I get maybe 20 meters out from the shore, and I just have like the worst anxiety attack you can imagine. I'm just thinking, oh man, man, if there's loons in a lake, what the hell's in the ocean? Like, there's got to be sharks. There's got to be like big monsters that can come and get me, right? So I'm just freaking out. My brain is just tripping, and I'm twitching like this. I've got no feed on the pegs, nothing going on. So I paddle back, and I'm like, that's it. This kayak is done. Like, I'm putting it up for sale. Like, I have no interest in this at all. Like, that's crazy, So I put it up online, and this guy comes by to look at it, and he's like, man, this thing's brand new. Like, what's the story? And I said, oh man, I just like not into it. Freaks the hell out of me. I can't do this. And he looks at me and he says, well, why don't you just learn how to roll it? Mm-hmm. And honestly, I started laughing. I didn't think that was a possible thing for a 19-foot sea kayak. And this was a big touring sea kayak I had. Yep. I'd seen whitewater kayakers rolling around on TV, but in Victoria, I didn't see these guys rolling around in sea kayaks. So I said, well, that's great, man. But like, where am I supposed to learn how to do this? And he says to me, well, actually, I'm a sea kayak instructor. He's like, I'm going to make you a deal. I'm going to teach you how to roll the kayak. And if you're still afraid of it, then I'll buy it. He said, I can't buy a kayak from somebody that's afraid. That's just doing an injustice to the industry. So good on him for that. His name's Eve Aquin, the guy that did that. So kudos to him for really encouraging me to just learn how to roll the kayak properly. Long story short, I ended up learning how to roll a kayak. I mean, there was some scary moments going through that that progression. But eventually I learned how to do it fairly well. And he kept bringing me back to the pool where he was teaching others, but he kind of let me come in for free and just kind of do my own thing and progress, which is really kind of him. Months pass, and I have a neighbor named Roy Scully, who I live with in Victoria. He calls me up one night. It's 11 o'clock at night, and he says, James, the surf's up. Like, let's go for a midnight surf. And I'm like, holy shit, this guy's crazy, right? Like, okay, let's do this. So we get out, and I know how to roll, so I'm okay if things go wrong. And we get out there, and I ended up falling over kind of unexpectedly because it's dark and I can't really see what's going on. And I went to roll, and I popped my shoulder. I really did a lot of damage to my one shoulder using like a C2C type of roll, right? And so that put me kind of, all of a sudden, now I found this thing that I was passionate about, and now I can't kayak. I'm literally sitting on a couch in pain for months. And at that time, there was this guy that was paddling around Vancouver Island doing the record. His name was Joe Blennis, and you might know that name. He was paddling around Vancouver Island to do the record, and I was watching him on he had this little spot thing that he would go, and I was following where he was going to be. And this was inspiring the heck out of me. I was like, oh man, I got to meet this guy. This is crazy. What's this guy doing? And so Roy and we ended up, this is a few months after I'd hurt myself, got back on the water, and we went and met this guy, and he was coming around the point, and I remember seeing him with this little stick kind of poking up. Right. And I'm like, no way. This is the guy that's beating the record. This is just not a possible thing. Like, he's using something he grabbed off the shore. What the hell's going on? This little poking stick coming up. Right. And he paddles up beside me, and I'm like, what is this? He's like, oh, this is a Greenland paddle. If you dig deep with it, you can get this great catch. And he had this theory that he was using with this paddle. And, we chatted for a few minutes, and he said, look, man, like I'm kind of doing a record. The finish is just around the point. Why don't you paddle over and we'll chat after? So he takes off, and he was gone. I couldn't catch up to this guy, and I was blown away. We paddle around the corner, and there's this media. There's 100 people maybe. Media's there. Cameras are going. Champagne's being busted over the kayak. This big episode's going on. And I'm like, there's no way this guy wants to talk to me. He's got way too much attention right now. So I turn around, start paddling back to my car, and he yells out, James, come on back. So we go over there, and he welcomes me to come, or offers for me to come to the island across and come spend the night with him and some of his friends, and they were like, we got some extra gear. Everything's good. Why don't you just come over and hang out with us? So I was like, I'm jumping on this opportunity. So I went over to the island and got to know Joe really well. And all of a sudden I look out on the water and there's this paddler coming in, and it's another one of these people with one of these sticks, right? And I'm like, look at this kayak. This kayak looks like some kind of ninja's kayak. And it was a Tyhe Greenland, or a Tyhe Greenland. Mm-hmm. So, like, you know, really low profile black. Yeah, I mean, this thing looked like a ninja's kayak. I was just enthralled. I was like, whoa, what is going on? And this girl paddles in. She's got a tulip on and a Greenland paddle. Looked like a little ninja. I'm like, what kind of kayak is this? And she goes, oh, actually, this is a rolling kayak. And I get out. I'm like, what? A rolling kayak? What? I'm like, that's great. I just learned how to roll. She says, well, what kind of roll did you learn? And I said, I don't know, but sea kayak roll, a sea to sea roll, whatever, what, is there more than one? And she said, oh yeah, there's 35 different ways to roll a Greenland kayak. And then my mind just went, like, it just immediately exploded. I'm like, oh man, if I can learn how to roll 35 different ways, certainly I can overcome this fear that I'm dealing with. You know, because I was still dealing with that anxiety and that fear, not knowing. And it turned out to be Helen Wilson was the girl that was there. Yeah. So long story short, Joe ended up giving me a spare paddle from that trip to inspire me and continue my journey. I went home and I sold that dirt bike and I bought a Greenland kayak, and the rest was history from there. Being self-employed at the time, I'm a little bit obsessive, and I went out at least twice a day for roughly about 8 months. And I was religiously going out every day, twice a day, morning and night. You know, in between, I was, you know, self-employed. I could do my work when I needed to. But I was on this mission. I was like, man, I got to learn how to do these rolls. And it was nothing for anybody else but myself. It was like a therapeutic thing. Like I was working through my own fears, you know, so that's how that happened. And, you know, I got good at it. And my parents called me once. They said, you know, like, what's going on? I'm like, oh, I learned how to roll a kayak. You know, I'm almost at 35 different ways. And they're like, bullshit. Right? You're like, no, that's not you. You don't like the water. We know you better than that. And I said, okay, well, I'll put a video together and I'll show you. So I ended up doing that. And the video really gained a lot of traction. And all of a sudden people were reaching out. They're like, man, how did you learn how to do all these rolls? What's going on? And I had locals come up to me asking me to start teaching them. And I'm like, oh man, I don't teach. Like, no. Like, I do this for myself. I'm not an instructor whatsoever. But somebody managed to convince me to teach them, and they learned the roll in like 5 minutes. And I was like boggled. I was like, what the hell? That took me like a month and a half to figure that out. But I was just providing the right information. I knew how to do it wrong just as well as I knew how to do it right. So I was able to give the information. And when I saw them messing up, I was like, oh yeah, I've been there. Like, just change this and do that. And like, boom, roll it up. Like, whoa, what's going on? So they were progressing really quick, the students I was getting. And I thought, oh man, I might be onto something. And I ended up, my first invite was to Japan. And I got an invite to Japan to teach at an international symposium there. And things really just kind of took off from that point. So I know that's a long story, but that's how I got into kayaking, a little bit different than a lot of others. But it started with a fear and it ended up into a passion. So it's like a fear to passion kind of path that I took.
That's incredible. It's interesting. The symposium we both worked at, Lumpy Waters, the other year, I spent a whole day doing rolling coaching with people, but all focused. They all want to play with the paddle and the boat. And actually, I spent the whole day working through fear. And it was miraculous that I didn't talk about the paddle or boat for more than 15% of the day. And the rest was all about, like, when did you learn to be scared of the water? How did you, like, etc. Lots and lots of questions. And their rolling went from 0 to hero in that day, just because they stopped being fearful of what was going on and started to like thrive in that environment. And I didn't need to talk about the paddle or the boat or the body or anything else like that. They just, like, people can sort their own thing out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even for me, it was like, it's a mental game. And for a lot of people, it really is. And when I teach students, it's one of the questions that I ask. I mean, who's nervous for today? Right. And out of 8 students, you might have one person or 2 people that'll put their hand up. But the reality is every single one of those students have some kind of nerves kind of going on in their head. There's some kind of unknown, and it's a mental game. It really is. And so I think that's a great approach to really address fear and to help people overcome that. I think then their learning progression starts to amplify. It starts to fast track a little bit more rather than fighting their own fear as they're trying to progress and learn something. So yeah, that's awesome, man.
Fear's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because there's 2 sorts of fear. There's rational fear and irrational fear. And I find that people have often very bizarre concoctions of the 2. So like you're stood on a beach with a group of clients, and I'm looking at this, and I'm going, there's no frigging way I want to take anybody anywhere near any of that. And yet there's half the group are normally are like, woohoo, this looks great. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like, you really should be scared of that, because that'll kick your butt.
Yeah. They just don't know what they don't know. You know what I mean?
That's it.
It's just the reality of it. I mean, I went through that progressing, like as I was getting better at it. I put myself in situations that were ridiculous. Like I was breaking kayaks. Like it was bad. I learned the hard way, but I'm kind of that sort of person. I need to bang my head on the wall 100 times before I break through it. So, but I can totally identify with that. Like I just didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't realize like shooting off a 10 or 12 foot wave and going off the falls backwards was a bad idea. I just thought, woohoo, this is fun. Next thing you know, kayak's broken and I'm separated for it, going, oh, maybe that was a bad idea.
That's it. It's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. There's the people's perception of fear often tells me a lot about how they've become up through paddling, like from where they started, the type of instructors or coaches they had, influences they had, why they're carrying certain bits of equipment with them that I look at and I'm like, oh my goodness me, again. And it's very, very interesting, and it's always a fine balance, isn't it? When you coach, you kind of have a bit of a duty to let people get their asses kicked a little bit. You're there to save them, like to sort it out, so that they can appreciate that this thing of water is far bigger than we are. But equally, you want them smiling at the end of the day, so they pay you to come back. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I'm very sensitive about as an instructor, because of how I got into this, I'm very sensitive to people's fears, and I address that in very light ways in the way that I instruct. I'm very calm how I instruct. I try to make sure that I'm helping them work through that fear. I'm nice and close, the power of touch, all sorts of different things that I use to really help calm people down so that their learning progression can amplify a little better. Because it is that fear that we were talking about earlier that really stumps a lot of people. I mean, how natural is it to be in a kayak upside down? It just doesn't feel right. There's nothing normal about that. And everything in your brain is telling you to get out of there, So if you can help somebody and really work through that fear, and often, telling my story about how I got into it, people think, okay, this guy's going to be a little bit more sensitive toward me when I'm, my fears. So I try to really bring that into my instruction. And I think that helps a lot of students that are dealing with that kind of fear.
Is that your like coaching or instructional X factor? Because I've noticed at events that people will sign up to a class because you're coaching it, regardless of what the class is. Like they don't look at the class. You've been there. They're all the boards go up at a symposium. People are signing up, and what I observe is very few paddlers look at the class title and content and what it's going to involve. They actually go and look for the coach's name, and they're like, James is doing this.
I gotta go with that one. Yeah.
That.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, I think we can all identify with that when we were getting into paddling. We all had, our heroes or these mentors people that we looked up to. Right. And I think social media really draws in a lot of it. It profiles us a little bit more. I mean, there's certainly way better paddlers in the world out there than me and instructors than me. I just do a good job of getting myself online. I'm a marketing guy. I can get myself out there and really make myself known. And I think it's energy. You know, I put a lot of energy into my instruction. I really put myself out there on the forefront. I mean, after a symposium, man, I crashed for like 2 days. I'm like, done. My energy level is spent. You know, I give all of that to my students, and I think that comes across, and I think that's why people are drawn to it. Much like yourself, like, I mean, you've got the high level of energy. You can get it. That's why people are into it. They're like, oh man, I gotta go hang out with Rob. I'm just gonna have a killer day because the energy level is so great. You know, that's what they're paying for. They want to get out there and they want to learn, and they want to be with somebody they're gonna have a good time with. You know. So when I'm teaching, I really try to turn that part on. I mean, really in the background, I'm generally not that type of an individual so much, but I really, when it comes to kayaking and it comes to rolling and any kind of like surfing, whatever, my passion just comes out and I can't let go. I'm just like, this is amazing. Like, you know, so I let that passion flow. And I think that's what people are attracted to.
One of the X factors I observe, this goes, you know, I've employed a lot of coaches in my time. And so I kind of try and work out who is it you want to employ. But this goes back to the symposium and like why people book onto classes with different people is I often think that it comes down to who is the star of the show. Is it the instructor who's like, check me out, I'm amazing, and you'll never be quite this good? Or because that's a thing that people have a habit of doing, or is it that whole ego thing? It drives me crazy. But like, okay, some people do that, and then there's the other side of the coin which is where I try to be, which is actually, if this is a TV show, you guys are the star of the show, and I'm just the director behind the camera, making it all happen. Is that where you go to as well?
Absolutely, 100%. That's my approach to a T. I really believe when I'm teaching, it's all about them. It has nothing to do with me. I mean, for me to just start barking up my own tree, that's egotistical. It's not what people are attracted to. They don't like that. I mean, we all have our own egos that we fight with once in a while, but I don't believe that that's the right approach when it comes to teaching people. I think you're right. I think you need to put the students in the forefront. It's all about them. It's about their experience and about what they're trying to get out of that day. So it's our responsibility as coaches to turn that on and to make that happen. You know, I think the egotistical type of approach is it turns a lot of people off. They're not into it. You know, some people are attracted to it, but it's your target market really shrunk if you're taking that approach. So
I agree very much so. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But it's interesting, you know, at Lumpy Waters, we have the coaches paddle on the Monday. We've had some pretty sporty coaches paddles, 18 feet at 18 seconds and all sorts of.
I saw some of that stuff, man. Sean Morley, like, just hacking it up. What is going on?
I can tell you a couple of funny stories about some of your Canadian brothers. We had one coach's paddle ended up like a yard sale with the size of the waves and how far they were apart. And we all tried going out the back, and a few of us got out the back. And you turn around and the fog lifted, and it just looked like a yard sale on the beach of.
And they're all coaches.
That's it. That's
the best part.
But I often think that would be a day that would be really good because people want to see their coaches strutting their stuff, doing cool stuff, showing how good they are. I often think like we should do like an invitational thing on the day of the coaches paddle and say, hey, you can't come on the water, but if you want to come to the beach, like you
come watch and you'll see what we're talking about.
That's it. And then when you see Sean Morley being barreled end over end in a 17-foot sea kayak, you can appreciate that wave is a bit bigger than you ever thought it was.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Lumpy Waters is probably one of the Like it really emphasizes students like probably better than any other symposium I've ever attended internationally. It's really, really student focused, and I feel like the instructors that are there are very much about the students and less about themselves. And it really comes across at that event. And Paul Kuthi, I think it created that, and it's an amazing, impactful feeling to be in an event like that and to be able to share like that. It's honestly, it's my favorite event, So
likewise. Yeah.
Kudos to Lumpy Waters, man. That's a kick-ass event. I highly recommend it to anybody that wants to go to it. It's just a whole lot of fun. And I mean, you get big water, you get to get out there and play. You're going to be safe because you're going to be with coaches that are going to take care of you and not throw you into too dangerous of a situation. I mean, boats still break and people do too. But as long as you're having fun and you end up with a big smile on your face, then it was a good day, right?
That's it. And the pub quiz is second to none. So
right
there for the pub.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've been trying in coronavirus times to do an online pub quiz for We Get Outdoors,
right?
Via Zoom or Facebook Live or something, and have that Lumpy Waters experience. But I can't make it quite work yet. It's going to happen though. It's going to happen.
Absolutely.
And like, we don't get paid to say this about Lumpy Waters, but the great thing is it's got something for everybody. If you want to scare yourself, there's that chance. But equally, if you want to go on flat water and work with somebody who's going to progress your rolling for you, or your skill set, or your technical ability, tactical ability, there's those opportunities as well with generally some of the best coaches in the world. Yeah,
I'd agree. It's a great venue too. Like, the venue is epic, like just unbelievable. That big rock right out front, like, oh man, it's just such a beautiful spot. I mean, even the last year I went to the symposium and I was teaching at it, and after the event, we stayed there for an extra week just to soak up the beauty of the place. I'm like, man, I gotta get out on these waves when there's not 100 people on them. So we spent a week there and just surfing and hanging out afterward, and it's just such a great spot. Beautiful.
Have you been to Cascade Head?
I have not actually been there. No, I stayed pretty much in that general area.
So Cascade
is it pretty
30 minutes drive south of Pacific City, where Lumpy Waters is, and it's got the Salmon River flows in into a big bay.
Okay.
There is it's that venue. When you go next, you have to go to Cascade Head. That venue, you could take the most advanced paddlers and push them, but equally you can take the waves going back up the estuary. Clean, green, and sort of 2 feet to 3 feet in height.
Beauty.
And if you get it with an incoming tide as well, if you swim, you just flush back up the estuary back towards the car.
Super safe. Yeah.
Super safe. And so you can take anybody there. There was a property for sale there about 3 years ago, and Paul Kuthi and I were like, can we raise $850,000?
Build a kayak school here. Good venue. Sounds amazing.
I think Paul and I were getting closer back to how you started. That we don't coach, we just do this for us.
Right. Totally.
So on that fear front, mate. What is it that you obviously get lots of students who've learned how to kayak, and then they come to you to improve, and then they've, everybody's got their own degree of trepidation and fears, and a lot of those they've learnt since they started kayaking. What is it that you wish that coaches would do differently in those first, 6 or 12 sessions that somebody has in a kayak? Because, like, from what I can work out, when somebody gets afraid of something, it's normally those first 6 or 12 sessions that puts that fear in. And what do you think that coaches or instructors should think about doing differently or adapting to ensure that people don't end up scared?
Right. Well, in my opinion, I think it's all about approach. I think a lot of times in the initial stages of, paddlers getting into kayaking, sometimes that approach is a little too aggressive, or it's a little too pushy, and it'll end up scaring them. Maybe they're getting pushed past their comfort zone a little further than they need to initially. because they're being pushed by a group. For me personally, I try to really suss out the individuals in my clinics and really work individually with those, because I can sense the fears that they're picking up, right? And as I think a lot of coaches can, the more they do it. And if you can work individually through those, sometimes that's hard when you have a really big group, but in a smaller group setting, it can really be effective. And I think if coaches just take a softer approach initially as they're gaining experience, I think it would be a little bit more helpful. I mean, that's just my approach. It's not necessarily going to work for everybody, but sometimes the more militant kind of approach where you're like, go do this, get out there, and there's all this kind of hype. For some people that really, it builds anxiety for them. They just like, oh man, it's like, I'm in a military camp, I got to get out there. Oh, and they're kind of freaking out. So like I said earlier, my approach tends to be a little bit more calm. I mean, I can be very in your face and excited, but at the same time, I can very calmly speak to somebody and be very, very patient. You know, I think patience is a virtue as well for being a really good instructor. You know, if you do it once, that's, you know, it's all about repeat activity, you know, and having the patience with somebody saying, no, it's fine. You know, that's why I'm here. I'm here to help you. So don't feel like doing it again is a problem. Like, that's how you're progressing. So let's just do that again, you know, and slowly breaking things down too. I think identifying where people are having issues and then breaking it down, pulling everything away and just working on that one skill can help people progress a little quicker too. So I think it's approach would be my answer to that.
I find, I'm trying to find the right words, but I find that like if there's a set syllabus to follow, actually that doesn't always serve the clients very well, because everybody in your group is working, as you say, at a different speed with different anxieties. And but for some students or clients, the syllabus is limiting because it stops them. Like they're 6 sessions in out of 12 and they've done the whole syllabus, and the coach is kind of like, I won't say ignore them, but they're like, right, cool, check, those guys have got that far. And I often think, you know, if we could just, if it's almost like we need to do one-to-one coaching in a group setting. So yes, you've got 8 clients, but actually you've got a group that you've got to manage and do some cool, fun stuff with. But actually you've got 8 individuals who all need individual input at different points in time. And actually your ability as a kayaker at that point in time really isn't that important. Like, as long as you're 3 steps, no, not 3 steps ahead, but 3 steps ahead of them. Like you're safe, you know what you're doing, you're in the right place at the right time with the right people, so on and so forth. Actually, you don't need to be a great boater. You need to be an amazing human being. I think like the approach that I often take, because a lot of times I'm teaching rolling. I mean, I teach surf clinics and that as well. But primarily when I go to an event, I'm kind of that rolling guy. And the approach that I generally take is I pair people up. So like, while I'm going, the first part of my sessions are all land-based information. Like, I don't even take anybody out into the water until I explain the full physics of what we're going out to do. And really give them some of that information, let them break that down before we get on the water. And during that time, I can generally be a fairly good judge of how people are going to progress just based on how well they're receiving the information or how flexible they are or whatnot. And so what I do is I pair them up, and like if I have 8 students, for example, I'm going to have 4 micro groups that are out on the water, and I can pair them up sort of in their skill level, or I can pair them up with, for example, maybe it might be even, you know, 2 friends that are going to be continuing working together, but they're kind of at that same sort of level. And what I do is I treat each one of those pairs, I just work within their own progression. I'm not trying to, like, for each individual, their success could be completely different from the person beside them, right? So defining success, I think, is a really important thing, especially coming into rolling. You come into rolling, well, your perception of success is, I'm going to leave here with a roll, right? So I think it's really critical as coaches to really define what success is for that individual for that day. Like, this is where you are now. This is where I want to see you get today. Doesn't mean that necessarily every single person is going to leave with a role, but provided they had a good progression and they're making great steps to get toward where they're going, in my opinion, that's success.
So I think that's another really important thing. As a coach or an instructor, you need to define what success is. Otherwise, they're gonna determine what that is on their own. And you really don't want people leaving feeling disappointed because their expectations were way higher than they possibly could have achieved. So
I often say when I'm coaching rolling, like, are they people like, what are we going to do first? And I say, we're going to fall over really comfortably.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like when we can fall over really comfortably, I'm pretty positive we can come up really quickly and comfortably as well. But like this rolling thing isn't just about what happens when you're upside down. Actually, there's a whole circle that happens, and each part of the circle has its own importance.
Absolutely.
Depending upon blade, environment, physicality, psychology, whatever else.
Totally. And I think a lot of times too, when people learn to roll, they learn how to roll generally in flatter water, maybe in a pool, warm water. And then I think the key is to take that skill once you dial it in and to really slowly start progressing yourself into that moving water or into those dynamic situations where you're actually going to need that roll, right? The chances are you're probably not going to need a roll in flat water. It's when you get out into that mess and it knocks you over that so you need to really get out into that environment and start to learn that environment and learn how to be calm in that environment. Because the first thing you're going to do is just get stressed and then you're pulling too hard and you're popping out your shoulder like I did, right? Like you really got to learn to relax and tone things down when you're out in that environment. No different than any of the other skills you do out in rough water conditions. It's all about relaxing, loosen the hips and really just letting the kayak do what it needs to do rather than fighting it. So I feel it's very important, once you learn how to roll in flatter water, that you slowly take that skill out into moving water where it's actually going to be needed. And I think a lot of paddlers don't do that. I think they learn how to roll and be like, okay, I know how to roll. I'm good. I'm just going to go progress all my other skills now. Right. But rolling a kayak is the ultimate way to get back. It's the ultimate rescue, right? I mean, it should be your first option, right? And for a lot of people, they learn it and they don't practice it enough in those kind of conditions, and they're swimming, and now it's they're rescuing in other ways when that starts to become more of a liability on your group, and if you can learn that skill in dynamic water, then you become less of a liability to the group that you're paddling with, which should be the ultimate goal for everybody. So.
Yeah, because
my advice would be once you learn it, get out into that moving water and start really progressing in that dynamic situation. Because current's going to hold you, right? It's going to hold you on one side or the other. Like, man, God forbid you only have a roll on the right, because you get out into the current, it's going to make you roll on the left.
That's very, very true. And it's interesting because we get lots of people who turn up places. There seems to be like a instruction or coaching void. That there seems to be a lot of coaches who can get somebody falling over on flat water in a swimming pool and bringing themselves back up to upright again. There seems to be a lot of those people about.
Right.
There doesn't seem to be much, if any, focus ever on that next stage you're talking about, which is like you're never going to need to do this slowly on flat water for real. Like that's an art form.
Absolutely.
That's an art form, slowly on flat water. Yeah. When you get knocked over by something, it's probably going to be bigger than you. It's going to be faster than you and harder than you. And like that slow speed that you are having and that approch, like that could be your helmet broken on boulders at the bottom of the beach break. Do you know what I mean? That could be dislocated. There's a lot of, we weren't designed to be upside down in kayaks, so let's get our head above our butt really quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. I think there's a need for more of those type of courses, if you will, or clinics, if you will, where it's the progressional stage from learning that role, but now how am I going to adapt when I get into these bigger conditions? And there, I mean, that's a whole class all on its own, and it's a progressional thing. It's all time, and I think that's another thing that students need to realize is, even though you may come to a rolling session and hammer off your roll in 10, 15 minutes, you still need to put in the time to dial it in. And it's not just done because you figured it out once. You know, it's no different than a paddle stroke. You don't just learn how to do a paddle stroke and then be like, okay, I'm done with that. I don't need that anymore. You know, you want to continue to put the hours and the time into it to really dial it in and make it yours, you know? So I think there's definitely room in the industry to there's a big gap right there. Like you're saying, there really is. I mean, this summer here on Vancouver Island, I'm going to be running some clinics that are very focused on that, you know, taking paddlers, you know, starting them in flat water and slowly starting to move them into dynamic flowing water, you know, peel off into an eddy and let me see you do a roll, you know, and then moving into a little bit faster water. Okay, now we're on a wave and you're intentionally going to fall over and roll, you know. You've got to relax and let the current take you to where it needs to take you. You know, you can't be all stiff and freaking out because it might just hold you on one side. So I think I think it's a very important process for sure.
I have a little thing that I get, and people don't like it very much, but I often put sea kayakers in a freestyle playboat when I want to develop their role. Out of context, because you can't brute force a roll in a freestyle boat. It does very bizarre things if you try and roll with it. Like freestyle boats magnify errors in your rolling technical ability. Like it just
absolutely
hugely. So you can have your blade at 90 degrees, like vertical in a sea kayak, and you can sweep it to roll. And because the kayak doesn't move, you get the resistance and you'll pop up. In a freestyle boat, if you do exactly the same thing, the boat just turns upside down, like stays flat and just goes through 180 degrees.
Your technique's got to be dialed if you're going to be rolling that kayak, right? Because it's got a lot of elements fighting against you.
That's it. And I think that's often missed as well. Like there's a lot we can learn from other people. And when people see me coaching rolling, the sea kayakers get grumpy because I make them go in playboats. I don't make them, but I advise them to. When I go to a whitewater symposium and coach at a whitewater symposium, I put the whitewater guys in sea kayaks because that's their missing piece.
Just to stir the pot up and give them another challenge, right? I mean, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
One of the reasons.
Give them a Greenland stick.
Yeah. I mean, that's just going to challenge them to another level all on its own, right? And I mean, that's primarily one of the reasons why I like Greenland kayaks is because I find it's a tool for me to really dial in my rolls. I mean, it's meant for rolling. So therefore I can roll it incredibly slow and I can dial in every single piece that I need to dial in. And by doing it slowly, I'm giving myself an opportunity to learn it. Rather than blowing through it, just like powering through a roll, chances are you're probably missing 2 or 3 really key pieces because you're just blowing through it. Right? You can slow it down, you can refine it, and you can really truly start to understand it. And I think like, I don't know how many years ago it would be now. I'm starting to feel old, but maybe like 7 or 8 years ago, I remember Greenland paddlers were considered black sheep in the industry. They were literally Greenland kayakers are over here and sea kayakers are over here, and that's where that's staying, and nothing's going to change, right? And, you know, Greenland paddlers were really looked at as those, they're just doing these fancy rolls on the water. It's useless. They're doing it in flat water. It's just this ballet dancing kind of thing going on, you know, and it really gave it this separation. And I took it from a little bit of a different approach. I looked at the Greenland kayak and the paddle as a tool in order to refine and get really good at something. But I was all about transferring that skill now into the bigger sea kayak and getting myself out into those bigger waves and utilizing that skill set that I learned on that other side. So for me, it was about blending those two pieces together. It was about like Greenland paddlers and sea kayakers need to start to blend together because there's all this value over here in Greenland kayaking and rolling technique that sea kayakers are kind of pushing away and kind of ignoring. And in a lot of symposiums, you didn't really see Greenland kayaking. And I think now you're starting to see that a little bit more. Almost in every event, you see at least some kind of a Greenland skills or Greenland rolling type of, or even maybe a clinic with Greenland paddles, because more and more people are starting to use them now. It's starting to become a little bit more of a thing, you know? And I mean, for myself, that's what I was pushing the whole time. I'm like, come on, guys, there is no black and white. It's all gray. Like, everybody, let's get together. Come on, let's do this thing, you know? So that's always been my approach is really trying to blend the two together.
you've done what's important though, James, because you've taken what was perceived and still is in a lot of environments, the Greenland rolling's an art. It's a flat water ballet art. And it still is. And unfortunately, it's often still coached, instructed like that.
I agree.
And actually, where it really becomes relevant is where there's a 5-foot wave that's just knocked you over. And then you don't have the time to go slow. Like you've done slow in your learning building blocks, haven't you? And then you need to speed it up and make it more reliable and more relevant to the environment. And I just think that's something that needs more focus.
I agree 100%. Like when I teach in my clinics, I am not a Greenland purist. There is nothing about me that is a Greenland purist. I am blending everything. Like you're going to find Euroblades in my classes. I'm going to teach you how to use a Euroblade. I'm going to teach you the transition between a Greenland blade and a Euroblade. I feel there's a ton of relevance in the tradition of kayaking that can be mended into modern day sea kayaking. And I try to really bring that across in my clinics. I'm not the guy that's going to be like, keep your Euroblade in the car. That thing's useless. You know what I mean? Like I disagree. I think the Euroblade is a better tool for a lot of situations, you know? So yeah, you know, and I might get hackled for saying that, but the reality is you're going to have a lot more catch with the Euroblade and some of that bigger dynamic aerated water, where a Greenland paddle is just like you're cutting butter. Like I can tell you that from experience, right? I've been stuck on the Skookumchuck wave for 6.5 minutes with the Greenland paddle. It sucks, you know. Like I'm just like I can't get out of there because I'm literally just slicing butter. You know, had I had a good Euroblade with some catch, I might have been able to back myself off of that wave, but I was just stuck in there. You know, it's a big difference between.
It's about understanding that we're all kayakers as opposed to being a Greenland kayaker or a sea kayaker or a whitewater kayaker. And then about picking, before we pressed go on this and started chatting, you mentioned about like the right tool for the job. And if you're at Skookumchucks and there's a lot of water, or Okasolo and there's a lot of water, you're not actually sea kayaking or Greenland kayaking. You're actually whitewater kayaking at that point in time.
Yeah.
In
essentially,
a Euroblade that is a derivative of a whitewater kayak blade, really, that makes lots and lots and lots of sense. But equally, if you're on some journey, like the strain of a Euroblade on your joints and your muscles can be hectic, in which case a Greenland paddle would be more suitable or more sensible. The problem is we don't have a garage we can tow behind us with loads of different paddles. Right.
And that's where breakdown paddles, because you're starting to find more sea kayakers, if they're dominantly using a Euroblade, they'll likely have a Greenland breakdown paddle on their back deck, just so that they can switch those blades up on an expedition or whatever they're doing, because they're using slightly different muscle group, right? And like you said, with a Greenland paddle, it's putting a little bit less strain on you. You can likely paddle for a longer time with a Greenland paddle than you could with a Euroblade before you're going to start to really get sore, especially if your technique's not perfect, right? So, but absolutely different tools meant for different things. Not to say that I'm not going to grab a Greenland paddle and challenge myself to do something a Euroblade paddler's doing, because that's just me. But that's not necessarily me. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the right tool for the job. It just means that I'm really challenging myself. I think what we were talking about before is you asked me why the Greenland paddle? Like what's the deal? And for me, because it's got so much less catch and it's a little bit more challenging in those bigger conditions, I find that I really have to put a lot more focus on myself as the paddler and the kayak. So there's that whole body, boat, blade kind of combo that's going on. And if you take one of those pieces away, you're going to have to start really focusing on the others. You know, it's like if you go blind, all of your other senses become a little bit more aware, and you have to really start to focus on those other senses and to get yourself back. So with the Greenland paddle, it's really like, I really have to focus on my boat control. I really got to thread that needle up I'm going through an eddy line to get to the front. You know, like I have to, otherwise I'm just getting pushed off. So I feel like it enhances the skill to a little bit. It makes me think a little bit more in depth about what I'm doing. And in theory, I mean, that's going to make you a better paddler faster, you know, because you're taking away a piece. But the thing is like I said, I'm not just using a Greenland paddle. I'm very much the guy that's grabbing one or the other, just depending. I want to know the differences between the two. I want to be able to discover that for myself so that I can explain that to my students, because they are different tools, and, one's not better than the other. They're meant for two different things. So I just think that, I just feel that they're two different tools for two different things. There's no reason to dog one or the other. They're both great tools, and they're both going to help you. So
I think one of the things I often consider is that the increase of hardness of somebody's environment. If I've got a client with a Greenland paddle and that's the thing they want to use, I'm like, cool, we could use that, but I want to guide them to do like a 5% increase in hardness from where they're competent to just 5% more. Because I'm very conscious that you can't muscle your way out of a problem with a Greenland paddle. Like, either you make it work or you pretty much don't. Like you were saying about Skookumchuck, 6.5 minutes sat there, and no matter what you did,
I wasn't going anywhere. I had to wait for that max to kind of start to look, Of course, I jumped out right at max, so it's just a big bloody foam pile. But I mean, we're talking. I had been paddling for 2 years at that point. This is that whole like naive paddler, like going over the limit. Like I was pushing myself and putting myself into situations. You know what? I learned real quick. It took that 6.5 minutes, taught me that that's not the right tool. Right? So
how long 6.5 minutes is until you've been sat on a broken wave for 6.5 minutes?
It's a long time.
It's exhausting.
I mean, that video, if you want to watch that video, it's on YouTube. I mean, literally, I'm a new paddler. I'm out there. I think Reg Lake is the guy that actually filmed it. And you just listen to his comments all the way through. He's like, holy shit, how does he manage to be out there that long? All it was for me is I had to find the balance point on that kayak. Like, it was critical for me, There's a lot of times when I was watching guys in the foam pile, they're just leaning so heavy into that foam pile. It just looked like so much goddamn work. And while I was out there, I started to realize, wow, there's this flat spot underneath me. If I just sit right here, I don't even need to use my paddle. So it's like 4 minutes into me sitting in a foam pile, and I'm like lifting my hands up in the air, just balancing. What else am I going to do? I'm stuck out there. So there's a lot to learn when you put yourself into bad situations like that. I'm not suggesting everybody do it, but that was my progression. It's always been my progression. I always just push until I figure it out. So
what's next on your progression list?
Next on my progression list, I mean, right now, like I said, I'm paddling in a lot of the local tidal rapids. I'm working on my own personal skills. I mean, and it's for myself. It's for myself, and it's also, I believe as instructors, it's great to be able to lead by example as well. So if I'm going to be teaching some of those things, I believe that I should be able to show that by example when I'm on. It's no different than when I'm teaching a rolling clinic. They want to see me roll. They want to see what that looks like. I just talked about it. Now they need a visual kind of connection to put that together. And I feel if I'm going to start teaching more in dynamic water, I'm going to start teaching in tidal rapids and surfing and that sort of stuff. It's important that I build my skill set up too, so that I can be an example of that. So for this summer, that's where I am. That's what I'm doing. I mean, I have some personal projects as a marketing guy that I'll obviously be working on at the same time. But no big plans for this summer. It's the bigger plan is just to work on my own personal skills, and then my tour is going to happen next summer. So
nice. East to west across Canada, or?
Yeah, west. Actually, the opposite. West to east, because I'm in the west, so I'm going to start west and then work our way all the way to the east coast of Canada. It was planned to go this summer. And I put out one notice to sort of advertise it, and we got 60% full pretty much within a week, but I had to stop the marketing on it. And when the COVID hit, that's when basically I had to postpone it. So there's a lot of students already signed up for that clinic. And the unfortunate thing is now they don't really have that. They don't have me in the area now this summer, now that's happened. So what I've done is I put together a special video series for all of those that actually prepaid for that clinic, so that I'm able to do online mentoring with them. I'm able to help them out through the summer, through this kind of stuff, through video chatting. They can show me examples. I can help mentor. Just because I'm not there doesn't mean I can't help them and I can't give them that value. So I'm trying to give them as much value as I can right now. In fact, yesterday I was out doing some more rolling and recording so that I can put that series together for them. So that's one of the things that I'm working on right now, is that video series.
That's super cool. There's a lot of interesting conversations happening globally now at this point in time around the whole adventure sports guiding, coaching, leading industry, around the use of virtual reality and the use of, just like Zoom, like we are now, and Facebook Live.
Absolutely.
Yes, you can see something you can help somebody with because they've sent you a video of them trying to do X, Y, and Z. But then how do you then manage that person's safety? Like, there's a whole load of considerations to have.
We're all learning this right now because we've never been pushed into this area. I think video analysis and video chats and stuff like that, I mean, they've been around for a long time, but I don't think that none of us have really been pushed into having to do that. And now with COVID, we're all starting to realize, man, there's this great tool that we should be using right now, but it does come with the sacrifice. Like it's never going to be the same. Like you video chats and video analysis is never going to be the same as one-on-one personal instruction. It's just not going to have that same element to it. It's going to take a little bit longer, where I might be there in person. I can say, oh, just fix that. Well, in order for me to fix that on video, they're going to have to record it. They're going to have to upload it. They're going to have to send it to me, wait for my response. There's this big lag that happens in it. So I think it's a learning process for a lot of us as instructors. How do we utilize these platforms to be more effective?
I think there's going to be a shrink in the industry as a whole of less people coaching in the outdoor industry as a whole. But I think that for those of us who are left at the end of it, I say confidently, that's me, because you've got marketing as a job on the side and I have a job on the side as well. So like life's good. But those of us who are left, I think that our clients are going to appreciate time with us far more than they ever have done in the past. And that's not to
I would agree.
Not to say they were unappreciative, like they've loved it, but I think they'll love it even more because it's it's marketing, supply and demand. Hey,
totally, 100%. I couldn't agree more. I think you've totally nailed it. I think the other thing that we're seeing here, and I think I know you guys are, I don't know if you're in lockdown still, but you guys are still kind of in your first stage, likely. Here on the island, things are progressing a little quicker, and we're already noticing a big spike in the outdoor industry. Good luck buying a kayak right now here in Canada. Like literally sold out across the board. I mean, even you go down to the US, sold out. Daniel Arbuckle, a good buddy of mine, record sales, like literally just pumping out kayaks. I think what happens when you have a pandemic like this is people start to really think about their health a little bit more. I mean, they're stuck in the house and they can't really do anything. They're like, what can I do? So they're looking to outdoor sports or outdoor activity that can kind of get them out there and keep them healthy. And sea kayaking is a great one. You can go out and do something really mellow, and you can take that to an extreme level if you want to, right? So we're finding that at least here in Canada on the West Coast, I think the East Coast is a little slower than the West Coast right now with what's going on, but outdoor sales are just booming, right? And you're right, the instructional level has dropped way down, so there's not as many instructors out there because we have to follow protocol. There's all these things. So you're right, it's going to become a little bit more, it's going to become a more special kind of experience, if you will, when you do get to go to those events and you do get to interact with those coaches. And just think about how much more pumped and excited those coaches are going to be too, because they're not doing it 100 times a year. Now they're doing it a handful of times, and they really just delivering that good information, So I think you're right. I think things are changing, and we're going to have to adapt real quick. That's my marketing brain.
I do a lot of marketing in my other part of life, and
right. So do I. I mean, that's how I make my living. Really.
Likewise.
Sea kayaking is my passion. Like, don't get me wrong. I make money kayaking, but it's definitely not my bread and butter. Right. So, I mean, for the first, I think 4 years as a sea kayak instructor, that's all I relied on was sea kayak instruction, and it burnt me out. Like, I had to travel a lot. Like, I was traveling around the world 8 to 10 times a year. You know, I have a family, and it was hard on the family. When I was home, I was constantly just out making another $100, you know? And it wasn't until I started to realize that kayak construction really isn't a lucrative industry that I started to have to play off the marketing that I was more educated with. So putting the two together made it a doable thing, you know?
There's definitely, I don't think that people realize, and our colleagues who maybe do this as their full-time job,
right,
just how much they're going to have to change to stay relevant.
Yeah. It's scary. It's scary because I think that I think it's scary because I think a lot of those people are going to find struggle, you know, unless you can adapt really, really quickly, and unless you can have an open mind about the change. I think it's going to be a struggle, and it's going to root people out. Unfortunately, some of the good ones are going to be gone.
Well, so, some of the good ones will go and find another way of making money for themselves.
Yeah, they're going to be gone, but they're going to be doing something else in order to make that income. Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Myself, like my wife and I are going to move to the middle of nowhere in this year.
Right.
Well, we've got to sell the house I'm sat in now first.
Yeah.
I've just worked out that as long as I've got an airport within an hour's drive of where I live, maybe 2 hours, and I've got a good internet connection, I can live in Outer Mongolia, and I can live in one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth in the middle of nowhere. And as long as I've got internet and I've got an airport a few hours away, not a big airport, just like a little local airport, it doesn't have to be big.
Yeah.
Actually, we don't have to be tied to a house or a city or, well, you're in a fifth wheel in the middle of a beautiful island in Canada. Yeah. I mean, here we are.
It's a lifestyle. Sure. Yeah, I mean, and it's a way of thinking, right? It's like marketing can really offer that to you. It can offer you that dynamic ability to be able to work anywhere in the world. And that's really, you kind of nailed it. That's the approach I take. Like I've really tried to build my brand and my business around being remote so that I can travel, so that I can enjoy those good parts of life that I want. I don't want to be stuck in a box. I don't want to be sitting in an office. I've done that. It's not me, you know, like as soon as I get outside and I get to like experience the outdoors, it's like I become alive. You know, you put me inside a box and man, don't hold me there too long. It's just a warning, you know, like I really need to be out. So like I built my brand and my business really around being able to be remote and travel. And a few years ago, we got rid of the house. We got rid of all of the possessions except for the kayaking stuff, and really just, you know, embraced a life of travel. We purchased a nice big fifth wheel and a truck, and that's how we live now. I mean, we were in Baja for 6 months this winter, just living it up down there. And, you know, it's amazing. You know, it's changed my perspective on life. It's really kind of giving me a refresh, if you will. Like I don't feel tied down anymore. I feel like I have the freedom to be myself, and that's really important. So
and I think a lot of people will find that over the next 12 months. I think a lot of people will be like an ostrich, and they'll put their head in the sand and keep hoping that it goes back to how it was. And I'm not so convinced that it will. I think we'll get. I
think they're going to have their head in the sand for a while. Unfortunately, right? Yeah. So it's about thinking outside the box and looking into the future a little bit, and like yourself, this setting yourself up to be a little bit more remote, so that you have the ability to do that. You got to look right now, like even with the way society is going, look at how many people are working from home all of a sudden. You know, before it was not accepted to work at home, and now all of a sudden it's being promoted.
Yeah.
It's encouraged, right? Like that's bizarre all on its own. But I think what's going to happen is the corporate world's going to start to learn really quick that this is effective, and also that they are saving a lot of money. The other thing is e-commerce. Like, look at e-commerce. E-commerce, there was a whole generation of people in e-commerce that were like, oh, I'm not buying anything online. No, that's just not my thing. And now we're forced to use e-commerce to purchase stuff. The e-commerce industry is going to just boom. And that's all remote based work, right? So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, that's growing right now currently as things are happening with the pandemic. It's just about jumping on that bandwagon.
Makes it challenging for the outdoor industry, though. You know, the traditional outdoor business has got a retail outlet, shop of some sort. It's got a guiding service, and it's got a coaching service, and maybe a rental service. Those are like the retail outlet, the shop itself is the hub, really, of bringing people in. And I think that the industry as a whole is going to have some very big shocks, because people will buy off the internet. They won't buy through a shop. And so then, you know, you don't have that hub to have your guiding, hire and coaching services out of. And then people maybe want less of that, or they want it in a different way. It's going to be a major reshuffle. Oh yeah.
And it's unfortunate for retailers, because there's a lot of great retailers out there that have supported the industry and helped build great kayakers, but things are changing. I mean, even in Victoria, our biggest kayak shop just shut down. You know, Ocean River Sports, done. Their retail shut down. I mean, they're still doing instruction. They're still running that side of the business, but the retail literally, it just couldn't make it anymore, you know? And I think that trend's going to continue, unfortunately. So it's about a shift and about changing the perspective, for sure.
That's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
So you said that's where you live, right there behind you. But when I look at your screen right now, I'm like, man, are you living the life or what?
The screen behind me is where I want to live.
Right. Okay.
If I took the screensaver or background off, you'd see a whiteboard and some curtains.
Yeah.
And, I'm in the home office, which is interesting. Years ago, when I first moved to South Africa, that's 8 or 9 years ago now. Myself and my business partner got fancy offices here in Johannesburg, and we did this and spent a lot of money. And, you know, it reached a stage where we were we met in the office on Friday afternoon for some whiskey, because we'd been out of the office with clients the rest of the week. You know, you go to their place. And so after a year, we just decided it was stupid spending thousands of dollars of extra money a month on fancy offices when all we did was drink whiskey for 2 hours a week.
Yeah. It becomes expensive whiskey, doesn't it?
It does. Well, the whiskey is pretty expensive all on its own to start with, without the office on top of it. But then, like, I suppose like 8 years ago, 7 years ago, we transitioned into this work from home. As long as you've got decent internet, you're all good to go. I guess that's lucky for us, because it puts us ahead of a lot of our competition. But I do feel for people out there. If you
me too.
Face-to-face teaching kayaking now, if that's how you were doing it and now you can't do it, it's a pretty rubbish 2020.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of people struggling this year. A lot. It's sad. It really is. And I mean, hopefully things turn around quickly, or quicker than soon anyway, so that we can get back to normal. Because I don't believe it's good on people's mental health even. Like, I mean, people are just getting knocked down, you know? And I think it's tough on a lot of people. So the ones that diversify will stand above it all. The ones that sit there and complain about it happening will likely continue to go down, right? So it's about, I think it's about just refocusing a little bit, for sure.
That's cool. Well, your services in marketing will never be more needed by people in the outdoor industry going forwards. Whether they can afford to pay you is a different matter, but that's
exactly.
So
well, that's just all about being creative too, right? I mean, that's where guerrilla marketing comes in hand right there. Make big things happen for little money, and then at least you're going to be able to continue to help brands out. So that's always been my approach. Always.
Perfect. You can expect some messages from me in the next week, because I've got a couple of projects I might need a hand on.
Perfect.
Or some ideas. So just heading back to kayaking before I stop stealing all your valuable day today and let you go paddling or something. Heading back towards kayaking quickly.
Yeah.
A lot of paddlers will watch this. And
right.
What is it that you wish that paddlers practiced when they're not with you, that they seldom practice? Does that make any sense? Like, what is it you wish they focused on to be a better boater that most paddlers ignore, I suppose?
I think this goes back to what we talked about earlier, that progression into getting into that rougher water, right? I think that's where a lot of people really aren't taking it to that next level. Another one for me is the progression of left and right, as opposed to what a lot of people are calling in the industry offside. There is no offside. That is not a thing.
No.
That is either a football or a hockey term. It is not a kayaking thing. Right? It's the left or it's the right. And I think a lot of people, like, primarily I'm talking about rolling, when they learn how to roll, let's say on their right side, they feel like that's it. They're done. They don't need to progress any more than that. But it's very much this yin yang thing where you need to be as good on your left as you are on your right. And I think that's where a lot of students, once they learn, they just kind of stop and they've got to roll on their right. And now they're being pushed into bigger water, being forced to roll on that other side. So for me, yeah, I think I think that's something that's lacking a little bit, is that understanding of being able to be balanced on both sides and to be able to have that roll on both sides. And calling it offside is just not a good idea. You're automatically letting yourself know it's off. Like, what are the chances you're going to try it if it's off? Right? You're not likely, right, to even bother trying because it's off. So if you just like reapproach that thought process and say it's my left side or it's my right side, and don't even call it my better side or my worse side, because now you're all already, again, psychologically setting yourself up for failure. So it's just a left, it's a right. When we learn to paddle, we don't learn to paddle really well on the left, right? It's an equal balance. So it's very much the same thing.
That's interesting. I did some research when I did my degree, which was quite a long time ago. And it was around though the concept of learning. So if you learn something on, let's say, the right-hand side, how many repetitions could you get an Eskimo roll dialed if they're like only doing right? And then you transition, right. As soon as they've got right, you transition to left. How many repetitions does that take? You get to a number.
Right.
And then what then happens though, if you do, for every one practice repetition on the left, you do one on the right. What then happens? You do your left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, the whole way through. And
right.
What we got to, or what I got to, was that somebody can learn to do something very quickly on one side, like an Eskimo roll, very, very quick.
Right.
It's a very short period of time. But then if they've only done it on the right, the transition to the left takes about 14 to 18 times more time than it took to get it on the left-hand side.
Totally.
What I found was that you get gratification very quickly for just focusing on one side and getting up. But actually, if you look at rolling as a whole, we were just using C to C, so it's a very closed thought. That actually, if you just go left, right, left, right, left, right, you don't get a roll for quite a while. Like, it takes quite a while to get your roll, but you actually decrease your total learning time by about a third.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And so
I mean, when I
as a coach, can you get somebody to put off that need for gratification longer and longer and longer?
Yeah, right. That's a tough one.
Because they'll be better.
That's a tough one. Yeah, that's a tough one though. Like, I mean, I promote when I'm teaching rolling that we're going to focus on the dominant side just to learn the skill and to dial in the skill. But once that skill has been learned, it's really important to transfer it to the other side. I agree. I think if you're just starting with the steps of the roll and then you're constantly making them go left and right, the confusion in the head and the muscle memory is just, it's just too much for somebody to comprehend, unless they're very ambidextrous. For example, if they're like a yoga master or they're just like very balanced, you know. One great example would be Jamie Sharp. I mean, he's so balanced with his yoga. He's just left, right. What do you mean? There is no left or right to him, you know. I remember he came to me. He's like, "Oh man, I want to learn all these sculling rolls." Like the sculling rolls are kind of the difficult rolls. You're not really doing a lot with your body. It's just manipulating the paddle angle to roll the kayak around. There's one on the front deck, there's one on the back deck, and then there's one underneath the hull, right? And I mean, it's difficult. They're difficult to do. I've never had a student that could pick it up as fast as he did. He literally just was like, "Oh, what do I do? Oh, I do this." Went under, first shot, like sculling roll on the right, and then he just immediately transferred it to the other side, which is not something that's normal. I don't think you see that very often with people. A lot of times people have a dominant side that they're a little bit more flexible on. You know, and the other side is they're generally not as flexible. Go ahead.
Jamie is not a sea kayaker. Jamie is a boater. Like that guy,
he is.
Like Zambezi whitewater kayaking, Grand Canyon whitewater kayaking, sea kayaking, Lofoten Isles and Svalbard, open canoeing through boundary waters. Like, and I think that if somebody becomes a boater, so they're like, I don't know, in Hawaii, they talk about watermen, don't they? The guys who can like surf, sail, like life save, everything. And I think if somebody becomes like a true boater, that's like a waterman, actually they can learn a new aspect.
Very quickly. Very, very quickly. Yeah. I mean, he's a great example. I was out with Jamie Sharp 2 days ago, and before he met us at the tidal rapid, he went and ran a big river, dropping off waterfalls. Literally drove his car from that exit right over to a rapid. So he's going right from a whitewater kayaker right into sea kayak, literally in the same day. Yep. Right. And that skill set becomes very obvious when you watch him paddle, you know?
So we might be leading people into something I think people should focus more on, is about becoming a boater as opposed to labeling themselves as a as a thing.
I agree. Jump into another craft and see how good you are now. You know what I mean? That's really, and that's another thing with the paddle, right? It's like, oh, you're really good at doing that. Here, grab a Greenland paddle and now try it. Just diversify a little bit. Try to learn. You know, it's going to make you better in the end. Jumping in different kayaks, trying different paddles, you know,
it's
you diversify.
When people learn, they're often taught in isolation. It's like clinical, sterile almost. And yet, and they get to use the same paddle, the same boats, the same get on, the same get off, the same dry suit, the same PF, everything's same. And yet, the reality is of our playground is that nothing happens in isolation. Nothing remains the same for longer than a few seconds. Everything's always changing and moving. And so I often wonder how much if we're doing people a disservice by letting them trap themselves in the kayak, the paddle, the place, or whatever it might be, when they learn, because they get this false appreciation of how good they are or they aren't that isn't transferable anywhere else.
Yeah. I completely agree. I completely agree 100%. And again, it's diversify, like just like try everything. You know, if you think you're good at something, jump in another craft and try it there. You know, as far as rolling kayaks, I went through that progression. Yeah, I had Greenland kayaks, but the next was to like jump into a bigger sea kayak. And then it was to jump into like a double sea kayak to see if I could do that. And then I got challenged to do it in like fishing kayaks. You know, I was like, diversify, just grab everything I could grab to try to roll it. Obviously, some are going to be easier than the others, but it's really going to start to like, it's going to let you know where you need to work. You know, like you're going to start to figure out what pieces you need to be stronger at. As soon as you start to like find failure and then start to micro build that sort of so that you can continue to progress. Because you're right. I think sometimes we get too comfortable in our own craft. yeah, we're good at doing it in that. But what happens if now I go to a symposium and I've got to use a completely different kayak and a completely different paddle? You know, you see it all the time. You people going to sea kayak symposiums and it's like, oh man, I can't shred that wave like I normally do because I got this kayak that's like locking in. And diversify. Just diversify.
I often end up when I'm coaching, not in my kayak, but like after 2 hours, I'm not in my kayak. Somebody else is paddling it. I'm not using my paddle because I've given it to somebody else. And so you end up with somebody else's paddle, somebody else's boat, and you've still got to look after their safety and their well-being and demonstrate stuff like to a half competent level.
No doubt. And, that's where it becomes even more important, especially if you're coaching. Because you're right, same thing for me, right? I mean, I get out my kayak and my paddle and they're like, oh, I want to try your kayak, I want to try your paddle. So now I'm like in a completely different kayak using a Euroblade trying to demonstrate the same skills I was trying to demonstrate before. So it becomes more challenging. You need to be good enough to diversify for sure. Absolutely. Incredible.
James, I just want to take a couple of seconds just to say thank you to you for everything that you give to the outdoor and paddle sports industry. I don't think that people have said, I don't think thank you is said often enough to people, but seeing the people come off the beach with smiles on their faces is like they've had the best day ever. Like not every coach pulls that off, and you pull that off consistently, reliably, with people wanting to book you because of who you are, not what you can do. And so I just want to say thank you for what you bring to the industry, because people like you make my life happy. People like you, I look forward to jumping into. Like when I'm going to a symposium, I'm like, who are the other coaches? And often my decision making, do I fly to Japan, Australia, America, wherever it might be, is often linked to who else is going to be there. And when your name's on the lineup, I'm like, cool, I'll go because James is going to be there.
Buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you. That really, I mean, it's an honor. Thank you very much for that comment. That means a lot, especially coming from you. So thank you so much. Appreciate that.
My friend, it's true. Listen, if people want to get hold of you, if they want to come boating with you, get better, have some online mentoring, whereabouts do they find you?
So you could find me at kayak.ca. Kayak is spelled the traditional way, however. So it's Qajaq. So kayak. So that's how kayak was originally spelt in Greenland. So Qajaq.ca is my website. You can get a little bit more information about me. I'll have in the coming weeks here, I'm going to be putting up a bunch more courses on there, focused on what we were talking about earlier, moving water clinics and trying to get people into more dynamic water, but slowly progressing, trying to get them out there and feel a little bit more comfortable. So that's my focus for this summer. But they can find me on that website. There's some bunch of different roles you can check out and watch. And that's the best way to get a hold of me, through that or through Facebook. I tend to use Facebook a lot. It's probably my primary resource that I use. So you could find me on Facebook. Just look for James Manke. Chances are you're going to see me doing one of these, pointing at the camera. So if you find a guy pointing at the camera, that's probably me.
Cool. I'll put the links in YouTube and iTunes and everything else. The links for that will be below. So go
Thank
James,
you.
Go boating with him, and if nothing else, go subscribe to all of his YouTube channels, Facebook channels, and watch him do cool stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
James, thank you for your time today. Stay amazing, and I'm sure these guys want to catch up with you again soon.
Right. All right. Take care, my friend. Thank you again so much for having me, and really appreciate it. Looking forward to the next time we actually get to boat together. That's going to be fun. Hopefully that's soon.